72 hours of shadows. The illusion of control in a fractured, unforgiving system. The 10th dose of black caffeine provides zero clarity. Sleep is a luxury you cannot afford. Time blurs into a singular, agonizing loop. The mind begs for a total system shutdown. 72 continuous hours of damage control, cleaning up the chaotic aftermath of a territorial collapse. The mechanical routine takes over. Muscle memory dictates the movements when cognitive function begins failing. The medical operative finishes the extraction. No words are exchanged in this subterranean ecosystem. The physical remnants of failure. A brutal testament to the sudden structural collapses incurred tonight. Erasing the physical footprint, the ultimate responsibility falls on the one who cleans the mess. Every stain tells a story. Every story must be thoroughly scrubbed from the historical record. The furnace awaits its daily tribute. Fire is the most reliable eraser of past mistakes. Biological evidence turns into ash, a necessary procedure to keep the larger machine running smoothly. Identities melt away. The past is structurally neutralized within the belly of the roaring industrial beast. The toxic stench lingers in your lungs. The mental fatigue slowly morphs into aggressive paranoia. Confidential data turns to ash, an absolute necessity to maintain the operational security of the system. Routine equipment checks ground the mind. A cold piece of metal offers the only certainty. The perimeter feels hollow. The silence itself becomes an aggressive adversary in this isolated underground vault. Paranoia spikes the adrenaline. An unverified audio cue triggers a massive, immediate defensive nervous response. Nerves stretch to the breaking point. The shadow world demands constant, exhausting, predatory hypervigilance. The breach is initiated. Muscle memory prepares to send the unknown variable completely off the board. A false alarm. The profound emptiness of the kinetic threat forcefully shatters the fragile psychological barrier. The adrenaline crashes violently. A false positive sends the entire nervous system into a devastating tailspin. Gravity reclaims its hold. The structural integrity of the mind finally shatters under immense, continuous pressure. The tool of the trade lies dormant, an empty metallic shell resting on a thoroughly scrubbed foundation. The sensory overload is absolute. Every shadow conceals a phantom. Every silence amplifies the roaring panic. Oxygen becomes scarce. The subterranean isolation chokes the remaining cognitive function out of the biological frame. The uniform of control is utterly compromised. Fabric woven with deceit unravels in the brutal darkness. Auditory processing fails. The mind fabricates phantom operatives coming to initiate the final, inevitable structural erasure. The apex predator retreats. The architect of shadows becomes entirely consumed by the very darkness he manipulates. Classified data forcibly overwrites sanity. The collateral damage of the syndicate refuses to remain buried underground. Chemical solutions cannot dissolve psychological trauma. The stain permanently etches itself onto the internal hardware. The hands never feel clean. The primal red leaves a permanent, irreversible mark on the deepest psyche. Seeking an external anchor. The desperate need for a voice to confirm the cleanup is fully concluded. The frequency is dead. You are entirely disconnected, abandoned in the sterile depths of the isolation zone. The network goes offline. The total silence of the syndicate is the most terrifying kinetic threat imaginable. The final lifeline is severed. Frustration forcefully breaches the last remaining protocols of stoic professional conduct. The system finally crashes. Total paralysis overtakes the biological unit as the operational load exceeds maximum capacity. You are a disposable instrument. Once the mess is erased, the eraser itself loses all operational value. The artificial light fades. A mechanical death rattle, echoing the profound collapse of the internal psychological architecture. The kinetic storm passes. What remains is a hollow, chilling emptiness, completely devoid of any human emotional response. The reboot sequence initiates. The fractured machine forcefully reassembles itself to face the next inevitable territorial collapse. Gravity is temporarily defied. The biological machine forces itself upright to resume the endless shift. The reflection reveals a stranger. A hollow shell, operating entirely on mechanical survival instincts. A brief, brutal shock to the system. The only method to force a hard biological reset. Temperature drops force cognitive clarity. The panic recedes back into the deeper, secure mental vaults. The armor is reconstructed. Follow the network to witness the complete mechanics of the Underworld. The mechanical loop restarts. The psychological toll is temporarily buried beneath cold, unyielding professional discipline. The trigger remains in the shadows, a silent monument to the fragility of the human mind. Retrieving the essential fuel. The toxic cycle requires constant, aggressive chemical maintenance to function. Cold caffeine coats the throat, a pathetic substitute for actual, restorative sleep in this hostile environment. Time is the ultimate adversary. The schedule demands absolute compliance. Regardless of structural fatigue, the countdown never pauses. Every passing second brings the syndicate closer to another catastrophic kinetic event. Moving toward the surface layer. The underground vault has been thoroughly scrubbed and completely neutralized. The exterior defense perimeter is secure. Silent operatives maintain the structural integrity of the boundary. Minimal communication prevents data leaks. A simple gesture confirms the successful conclusion of the cleanup operation. The seal is broken. The toxic atmosphere of the city replaces the sterile isolation of the clinic. The surface world offers no sanctuary, only a different flavor of toxic, suffocating pressure. The extraction vehicle waits, a mobile fortress designed to transport compromised assets across hostile urban sectors. Retreating into the mobile shadow, the physical body demands immediate extraction from the kinetic zone. The isolation continues inside the armor. The mind cannot escape the terrifying echoes of the underground. The eraser vanishes into the dark, ready to be deployed when the system inevitably fractures again. The physical escape is an illusion. The structural damage follows you directly into the moving fortress. A new kinetic variable emerges. The shift never ends until the entire system crumbles completely. Digital coordinates dictate biological movement. You are tethered to the infinite demands of the shadow network. Directives are silently passed. A sudden change in trajectory further destabilizes the fragile mental architecture. Plunging deeper into the hostile grid, the weather aligns perfectly with the creeping, paranoid despair. The barrier feels paper-thin. External chaos constantly threatens to shatter the heavily fortified internal vault. The elements attempt a natural cleanse, but the deep, structural stains remain permanently etched inside. A secondary extraction point. The brutal odor of chemical concealment replaces the sterile clinic bleach. Fear is the primary currency here. A fragile transaction executed under the crushing weight of paranoia. You become the kinetic threat, projecting an aura of absolute control while internally fracturing apart. Accepting the next heavy burden. Every asset transferred carries a massive, invisible psychological weight, verifying the tools of erasure. Synthetic compounds designed to permanently neutralize any organic structural mistakes. The venom required to paralyze the truth. A highly classified asset for permanent structural silencing. Panic is highly contagious. You must forcibly sever your auditory processors to maintain operational stability. A single motion enforces compliance. Words are entirely unnecessary when your presence radiates pure structural destruction. The secure vault is sealed. The transaction officially concludes, leaving no room for erratic variables. Returning to the mobile cage. The physical payload is secured, but the mental leak widens. The aftershocks of your presence linger, a toxic ripple effect disrupting the fragile urban ecosystem. The uniform is finally dismantled, stripping away the final layers of civilized corporate deception. Closing your eyes offers no shelter. The darkness inside the skull is far more hostile. Another descent into the concrete abyss. The architecture perfectly mirrors the bleak, inescapable internal landscape. Every step echoes like a gavel strike. The verdict is always guilty in this subterranean court. The remnants of previous kinetic disputes. Left to rust in the dark, forgotten by the architects. The gatekeeper to the lower levels. Brute force acting as the final deterrent against unauthorized entry. Clearance is granted through kinetic recognition. The payload secures safe passage deeper into the isolation zone. The cage descends, a mechanical coffin dragging the fractured mind further away from the surface world. The walls aggressively close in. Claustrophobia acts as a relentless, invisible adversary in the dark descent. Tension reaches the absolute limit, one frayed wire away from a catastrophic, terminal freefall. The temperature drops to freezing, a perfect environment for preserving the syndicate's most damaging operational errors. The cold numbs the biological frame, a temporary anesthetic for the agonizing structural damage within. The final destination is reached, the endpoint for all compromised assets requiring permanent chemical neutralization. Breaking the final containment seal. The toxic fumes of erasure violently assault the weakened respiratory system. The vapor violently conceals the danger. A perfectly engineered system for completely erasing historical footprints. The catalyst is ready. Highly classified chemicals engineered to permanently dissolve the physical remnants of failure. The hand hesitates. A microscopic glitch in the previously flawless, highly trained mechanical operating system. The firewall collapses entirely. The agonizing echoes of the suppressed past violently breach the internal defenses. The physical space aggressively attacks the senses. Every metallic sound becomes a terrifying kinetic threat. The pendulum of consequence swings relentlessly, waiting patiently to violently claim the next compromised biological asset. The biological unit completely shuts down. The extreme operational parameters have successfully shattered the foundational core. A sharp, violent kinetic shock forces a reboot. Pain remains the only reliable anchor to reality. The internal system forces a desperate reboot. A microscopic kinetic shock overrides the massive psychological failure. Mechanical precision fully returns. The biological unit suppresses all panic to execute the final chemical directive. A concentrated dose of permanent erasure. This synthetic compound guarantees the absolute silence of the past. The catalyst is successfully deployed. Toxic solutions meticulously dissolve the last remaining fragments of historical data. The thermal reaction violently consumes the evidence. The physical footprint is permanently removed from the equation. Containment protocols are strictly enforced. The dark remnants are locked away in the belly of the beast. The vault is permanently closed. What happens in the shadows is successfully buried beneath the ice. The final objective is achieved. The heavy burden of the underworld is temporarily lifted from your shoulders. Retreating into the mechanical ascent, the physical body prepares to forcefully return to the hostile surface. The isolation chamber seals itself again. The suffocating ascent back to the toxic urban grid begins. Moving away from the frozen depths, the mechanical cage violently pulls the empty shell upward. The structural damage persists. Every mechanical vibration aggressively rattles the fragile remnants of the psychological barrier. The hostile transition is complete. The toxic atmosphere of the garage violently invades the respiratory system. Shadows stretch across the damp concrete. Phantom operatives constantly stalk the perimeter of your shattered mind. The extraction signal violently cuts through the dark, a highly mechanical beacon guiding the broken asset. The perimeter recognizes the completion. Silent confirmation maintains the rigid structural integrity of the cartel network. Retreating into the armored sanctuary, the physical body demands immediate extraction from the highly toxic environment. The external world is forcefully muted. The mobile fortress seals the compromised asset securely inside. The locking mechanism engages. The physical barrier is secured, but the internal breach remains completely open. The eraser returns to the grid. The endless cycle of the shadow network continues its violent rotation. The physical escape is secured, yet the internal biological system remains critically unstable and deeply compromised. The city offers zero comfort, only endless concrete grids, waiting for the next inevitable structural collapse. The barrier deflects the elements. It completely fails to stop the crushing weight of the shadows. Erasing the physical footprint requires absolute dedication. The uniform absorbs the heavy collateral damage of silence. The biological unit demands immediate chemical fuel. The dark liquid is the only remaining operational necessity. The reserves are completely depleted. The mechanical loop violently demands energy that simply does not exist. An empty metallic shell on the floor. A perfect physical reflection of the hollow, drained asset above. Returning to the primary safe house. A sterile, elevated fortress designed to physically isolate the high-value assets. The transport vehicle departs. The final leg of the isolation protocol must be completed entirely alone. The absolute silence of the safe house. A chilling reminder of the total isolation required for survival. The network constantly watches. Absolute paranoia dictates that no biological asset is ever truly off the grid. Ascending back to the personal vault. The mechanical lift provides zero comfort to the fractured mind. Elevation offers no true escape. The structural damage follows the biological asset directly into the sky. The personal vault is entirely empty. A perfectly designed vacuum meant to completely neutralize external variables. The toxic grid sprawls endlessly below. A massive, violently operating machine that never ceases its destructive cycle. Shedding the outer layer of armor, The heavy uniform is discarded, but the internal stain remains. Airflow is forcefully restored. The crushing physical pressure slightly subsides, revealing the massive underlying psychological void. The final destination of the shift, the biological unit forcefully anchors itself to begin the cleansing cycle. The physical cleansing protocol activates, a desperate, highly mechanical attempt to completely sanitize the compromised internal hardware. The mirror reflects the ultimate truth. The eraser has successfully deleted himself from the human equation completely. The physical surface is dried, yet the internal biological hardware remains critically submerged in toxic shadows. The armory of corporate deception. Identical uniforms designed to completely mask the profound internal structural decay. The armor awaits its compromised host, a perfectly manufactured facade of absolute, terrifying mechanical control. Rebuilding the external shell. The biological unit physically prepares to re-enter the endless, highly toxic cycle. The psychological noose is voluntarily applied, a highly necessary constraint to maintain absolute operational focus. The knot is tightened. The fractured mind is forcefully bound together by strict, unyielding professional protocols. Perfection on the surface. Absolute, highly corrosive destruction, aggressively contained just beneath the expensive corporate fabric. The new day violently breaches the horizon. The syndicate demands another cycle of permanent structural erasure. The network transmits a new directive. The shadow machine never allows its assets to truly power down. Coordinates received. Another catastrophic structural failure requires immediate, highly discrete chemical and physical neutralization. The digital command overrides biological fatigue. The highly toxic cycle violently demands absolute, immediate obedience. Fresh tools for a new assignment. The physical footprint will be erased, but the ghosts continuously multiply. The kinetic threat is completely concealed. The apex predator successfully masquerades as a legitimate corporate entity. The psychological breakdown is successfully buried. The highly efficient, mechanical eraser forcefully takes the helm once again. The city violently wakes up, completely unaware of the highly classified violence, maintaining its fragile balance. Descending back into the highly toxic depths, the surface world is merely a temporary, blinding illusion. Emotions are forcefully disabled. The internal system requires complete, absolute operational silence to execute the kinetic directives. The transport awaits. The highly efficient shadow network never misses a single terrifying logistical beat. The mechanical loop continues. The fractured soul is completely, heavily concealed beneath layers of dark corporate armor. Control is a fragile illusion. Subscribe to the network if you want to survive the brutal underworld.